Here's something that should be mathematically impossible. The United States housing market just posted its lowest transaction volume since 1995, meaning fewer homes are selling right now than at any point in 30 years. And in the same breath, home prices are sitting near all-time highs. Simultaneously, fewer people buying, higher prices. In any normal market, those two things cancel each other out. That's how supply and demand works. You learned it in 8th grade, so did I. And yet here we are. The market is frozen. The prices are absurd. The average first-time buyer is now 40 years old, and if you've tried to buy a home recently as a US Muslim using a halal financing product, you already know something is deeply structurally wrong. You just can't quite put your finger on what. My name is Omar, and today we're going to do something that the real estate industry, the conventional mortgage industry, and most of the halal finance industry would all genuinely prefer you not do. We're going to explain exactly what happened to this market, every domino in order, with the actual numbers, including the parts that are unique to anyone trying to buy through Guidance, UIF, the post-merger LARIBA platform, or any other Sharia-compliant provider. So when you make your next move, you're making it with eyes open. Hit subscribe if you want to keep running the real math. Let's get into it. The median existing home price right now is about $418,000. In 2019, 7 years ago, it was $272,000. That's a 46% jump. Not in Manhattan, not in Palo Alto. Nationally, the median, the dead middle of the entire country. Conventional 30-year fixed mortgage rates are sitting around 6.5%. Halal financing structures from Guidance, UIF, Devon Bank, and the consolidated post-merger platforms are running profit rates very close to that, typically within a tenth of a point in either direction, depending on the contract structure. In January 2021, you could get a conventional 30-year fixed mortgage for 2.65%. The halal equivalent profit rates were tracking just above that. That is a completely different financial planet. Here's what that gap means in actual dollars on a halal contract. Same house, $400,000 purchase price, 20% down, $320,000 financed. At a 2021 era halal profit rate close to 2.85%. Your monthly is $1,323. At today's halal equivalent 6.6% rate, that same financed amount runs $2,043 a month. That's $720 more per month every month for 30 years. For the same house, same carpet, same school district, same yard the size of a prayer mat, and the house itself costs $146,000 more than it did 6 years ago. So you're paying more for the financing and more for the house, both at the same time, regardless of whether the contract on top says murabbaha, ijara, or anything else. This is not bad luck. It's the output of a very specific sequence of decisions and shocks that piled on top of each other over 5 years. The year is 2020. The world is on fire metaphorically, mostly, and the Federal Reserve, in an act of emergency financial panic, slashes rates to basically zero and starts buying $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month. By January 2021, the 30-year fixed mortgage hit 2.65%, the lowest rate Freddie Mac had recorded since 1971. Halal mortgage providers track that environment because their cost of capital is structured to follow benchmark rates, even though the contract format is different. People who'd been sitting on the fence about buying suddenly realized they could afford dramatically more house for the same monthly payment, so they bought and bought and bought some more. But that was only half the fuel. COVID rewired what Americans needed from their homes. Suddenly, your apartment was your office, your gym, your school, your iftar dining room, and your Taraweeh broadcast booth. A 700-square-foot place that used to feel fine suddenly felt like a sensory deprivation tank with a Wi-Fi password. Remote work exploded from under 6% to over 18% almost overnight, and millions of people started asking a reasonable question. If I can work from anywhere, why am I paying $2,800 a month to live somewhere I don't actually like with a masjid 40 minutes away? So they left. Manhattan shed 200,000 households. San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles each lost tens of thousands. They descended on Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, Tampa, Houston suburbs, Northern Virginia exurbs, places with tight inventory that suddenly had a stampede of buyers with pre-approvals, pandemic savings, and a desperate need for a home office and a halal grocery store within 10 miles. National home prices jumped 37% between March 2020 and March 2022. Not over a decade. 2 years, Austin climbed 61%, Phoenix 59%, Boise up 53%. At the peak, nearly 6,000 homes sold for $100,000 or more above asking price in a single month. If you bought in 2020 or 2021, including via a halal financing structure, you probably made one of the best financial decisions of your life almost entirely by accident. That's not skill, that's timing. And for everyone who wasn't in a position to buy during that window, what happened next made everything dramatically worse. By mid-2022, inflation was running at 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. So the Fed did what central banks do. 11 hikes in 16 months from 0.25% to 5.50%, the fastest tightening cycle in 4 decades. Mortgage rates followed in the worst possible direction. January 2022, 3.22%. October 2022, 7.08%. October 2023, 7.79%, the highest since 2000. On the same houses people were paying $100,000 over asking for 18 months earlier. Halal mortgage profit rates track the same trajectory because that's how the underlying cost of capital works, regardless of the contract wrapper. At 7.79% conventional or its halal equivalent, that $320,000 financed amount now costs $2,320 a month versus $1,323 at the pandemic low. That's almost $1,000 more per month, $360,000 more over the life of the contract for the same exact house. To buy the medium-priced home at today's 6.5%, you need to earn around $106,000 a year just to qualify. The median household income is $83,700. According to ISPU's American Muslim Poll 2025, 35% of U.S. Muslim households earn under $30,000 a year, and only 24% earn $100,000 or more. The qualifying threshold for the median American home now sits in territory most U.S. Muslim households simply do not occupy. Home sales fell from 6.12 million in 2021 to just over 4 million in 2025, the slowest 3-year stretch since the mid-1990s. We are selling fewer homes today in a country with 100 million more people than 1995 sold in 1995. But here's the part that should break your brain. Prices didn't fall. Demand collapsed and supply collapsed at exactly the same time, and that created something the modern housing market had never quite seen before. A total freeze. To understand why, you need to understand the thing quietly holding this entire market hostage. About 51% of all outstanding US mortgages carry a rate below 4%. Roughly 20% carry a rate below 3%. If you bought in 2020 or 2021 and locked in 2.75%, including through a halal contract structured at the equivalent profit rate, you are sitting on a financial instrument that no longer exists. The bank will not recreate it. The market cannot offer it. It is gone. So if you sell your house and buy another one today, you're not just moving, you're voluntarily surrendering the cheapest money you will almost certainly ever access in your lifetime. On a $400,000 financed amount, that swap costs $720 more per month every month forever. That's $86,000 over a decade just in additional financing costs for the audacity of wanting to live somewhere different. Federal Reserve researchers put the average lock-in cost, the pure financial penalty of trading your old mortgage for a new one, at over $65,000. So the rational homeowner stays in the house that's too small, in the nursery that's become a Zoom background in the neighborhood where they stopped knowing their neighbors 3 years ago. The Atlanta Fed found this effect reduces the probability that any homeowner lists their home by 21 to 23%. FHFA researchers estimated it has suppressed 1.7 million transactions that would otherwise have happened. The market isn't broken in the sense that it's collapsing. It's broken in the sense that it has completely stopped moving, like a door that won't open or close. To understand who's actually getting squeezed hardest in our community, let me walk you through someone specific. Let's call her Khadija. She's 31, works in healthcare administration in a normal mid-sized city with a real Muslim community, makes $74,000 a year, well above the national median, no credit card debt because she avoids riba on principal, a 760 credit score she built carefully through authorized user history, and a secured card she pays off monthly. $31,000 saved over 3 years of genuine sacrifice, skipped non-essential Umrah upgrades, no new car, lived with her parents longer than she wanted to. By any reasonable standard, Khadija is exactly the person halal homeownership was designed for. Here's what the market offers her in return. The median home in her city is $385,000. With 10% down, the financed amount is $346,500. At a halal equivalent profit rate of 6.6% on a diminishing musharaka contract, her monthly principal and rent component is $2,212. Add property taxes at $350, insurance at $150, maintenance reserve at $320, and the guidance residential LLC fee at $25. Total monthly $3,057. Khadija takes home about $4,650 a month. Halal housing would eat 66% of it, leaving her $1,593 for food, transportation, health insurance, halal grocery premium, sadaqah, the Hajj fund she's still trying to build for her parents, and the basic reality of being a human being. She cannot afford this house, not because she's irresponsible, because the income required to comfortably buy the median home in her market under any contract is around $110,000, and she makes $74,000. The gap isn't a personal failing, it's structural. There are millions of Khadijas in our community right now, financially solid people being told by every cultural signal that they should own a home by now, while being quietly excluded by numbers nobody discusses honestly. First-time buyers now make up just 21% of all purchases, a record low in 44 years of tracking. The historical norm is 40%. The median age of a first-time buyer is now 40. In the early 1990s, it was 28. Buying at 40 instead of 30 costs roughly $150,000 in lost lifetime equity from the decade of appreciation you missed. Baby boomers now make up 42% of all buyers. Half of older boomers are buying entirely in cash. They sold a house they bought for $200,000 in 1998. That's now worth $700,000. Walked in with no financing dependency, while the 32-year-old brother is trying to win a bidding war with a halal pre-approval letter and $31,000 saved. The downstream impact on our community shows up specifically in delayed marriage and family formation. 84% of Gen Z aspiring homeowners are delaying at least one major life milestone because of housing. 29% are postponing having children. 18% are delaying marriage. In our community, where marriage is encouraged early and where the unspoken expectation is often that the brother provides housing before the nikah, this pressure is amplified. Couples are getting engaged on the timeline of property markets they can't crack. The shortage didn't start in 2020. It was assembled piece by piece over 15 years of underbuilding after 2008. The US is short somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 million housing units. Builders pulled back hard after the financial crisis. For the entire 2010s, housing starts averaged about 990,000 per year against a historical baseline of 1.5 million. What got built skewed heavily toward the upper end of the market because that's where margins are. The starter home under 1,400 square feet, the traditional entry point for first-time buyers, went from over 400,000 units a year in the 1970s to just 65,000 in 2020, an 80% decline. The house that was supposed to be the beginning of the wealth-building ladder for working families was essentially discontinued as a product. Then came the pandemic surge, then the rate spike, and now tariffs. Steel up 50%, aluminum up 50%, Canadian lumber up 45% combined, adding an estimated $10,000 to $17,500 to the cost of every new home. The supply problem took a decade to create and will take at least a decade to meaningfully solve. At some point in every housing market conversation, someone says it. Is this 2008? No, not even close. In 2006 and 2007, subprime mortgages made up 18 to 21% of all originations. Today, subprime is roughly 3.6 to 4.2%. The median credit score at origination is 758, 50 points higher than 2006. In 2009, 26% of all mortgage properties were underwater. Today, just 2.2% are underwater. Homeowners are sitting on $35.8 trillion in collective equity. Foreclosures in 2024 totaled 174,100. In 2008, they hit 2.3 million. The 2008 crisis happened because banks lent money to people who couldn't repay it based on home values they largely invented. Today, the lending is sound, the borrowers are qualified, the equity is real, and you still can't afford anything. This is not a fragile market. It's a frozen, structurally constrained, deeply expensive market. A crash at least creates buying opportunities. A frozen market that grinds sideways mostly just continues to exist, absorbing more of people's income while waiting for time to do what policy can't. The thing everyone's waiting for is a significant drop in mortgage rates. Most forecasts have rates ending this year between 5.7 and 6.1%. Better, but a Bankrate survey found 37% of homeowners need rates below 5% before they'd even consider selling. That threshold isn't where we're headed this year. The lock-in effect fades naturally over time. People have kids, take new jobs, get divorced, retire, perform Hajj. The share of mortgages below 4% has already dropped from its peak of 65% to about 48% today. That slow release is the most realistic path to a more functional market, but slow is the operative word. This is a 5 to 10 year process, and here's the twist almost nobody's talking about. A dramatic rate drop might not fix affordability. It could temporarily make it worse. Millions of buyers are sitting on the sidelines right now. If rates drop to 5% quickly, that wave of pent-up demand floods back overnight. But supply doesn't recover overnight. The 3.5 million unit deficit took a decade to create. So when massive demand hits insufficient supply, prices spike. The same dynamic that drove the 2020 to 2022 surge could partially repeat at a higher base level. The cure, if it arrives too fast, could temporarily make the disease worse before it makes it better. The most honest forecast is the boring one. A slow multi-year correction where prices move roughly sideways while incomes gradually rise. No crash, no dramatic relief, just time and grinding adjustment with a lot of difficult personal decisions in the middle. If you're in your late 20s or 30s right now, especially in our community, you are navigating the most dysfunctional housing market any generation has faced since World War II. Your frustration is legitimate. The income required to buy the median home is $106,000. The median household income is $83,700. The system has a $22,000 gap baked in before you even show up. You are not failing at adulthood. The math is just broken. The decision to buy has to be based on your real numbers, not the market's narrative. If total monthly housing costs land below 28 to 30% of your gross income and you plan to stay at least 7 years, halal home buying makes financial sense. If the math doesn't work at that threshold, it doesn't work, and the wrapper on top of the contract doesn't change that arithmetic. Stretching to 45% of income because your halal mortgage advisor at the convention said it's a great time doesn't make it a great time. It makes you a future statistic and a future zakat skipper. Renting and investing the difference in Sharia-screened equities is a completely legitimate strategy that almost nobody with a financial incentive will suggest because nobody earns a commission when you put money into a Wahed account or an IRA holding HLAL. Joe Bradford, the AMJA imams who reviewed Islamic finance contracts in their 2014 Dallas conference, and many other recognized scholars have written explicit framings of renting under necessity as a permissible path for Muslims who can't responsibly afford a halal mortgage product. In a high-rate, high-price environment, the math can absolutely compete with or outperform buying an overpriced house through any contract. This is not a consolation prize. If you are buying, look seriously at new construction. Builder rate buy-downs at 4.5 to 5% are real even on the conventional side, and a small number of halal-aligned builders and brokers are now offering similar concessions. Just make sure the incentives aren't disguising an inflated base price. Run every number. The housing market you're dealing with is the product of 30 months of the cheapest money in American history, followed by the fastest rate hike cycle in 40 years layered on top of a decade of underbuilding that left the country 4 million homes short. The people who need prices to fall are priced out even if they do. The people who need to sell are financially trapped by the very low rates that made housing affordable 5 years ago. Everyone is stuck at opposite ends of the same problem for completely opposite reasons, and there is no policy lever, no rate cut, and no halal financing structure that fixes a structural imbalance this large in a single year. The era of buying any house at any price and assuming appreciation bails you out is over. Running the real numbers before you sign is not pessimism. It's the only sane way to navigate a market this expensive and this broken inside the deen. As always, the math is the math. The scholarly views on halal mortgage products and on renting under necessity genuinely differ, and your final ruling on what's appropriate for your specific situation has to come from a scholar you trust who knows your numbers and your family obligations. You're not crazy for looking at listings and thinking none of this adds up. It genuinely doesn't. Drop a like if this helped, subscribe to keep running the real math together, and I'll see you in the next one.